God bless and good morning. Today we're going to find out what you sipping on, boy. Sip protocol initiation. Sealing the soul identity path. Your spirit's been speaking fluently, but you are still choosing to be fake as fuck. You thought you were moving in alignment, but your decisions were just multilingual. You had one spirit, but three identities. One for prayer, one for panic, one for pretending. Yeah, your soul was sealed, but your behavior was still up for debate. You don't need another goal. You need to stop being fake. You need a new protocol. Warning. This transmission initiates interoperability between spirit, system, and soul. And you're only going to find it here on the Do You rules. Side effects may include emotional whiplash after moments of spiritual breakthrough, internal conflict between what you feel and what you do, role confusion masked as personality shifts, and decision fatigue that feels like depression. Welcome to Raw for Epoch 2, day 138. You're not scattered. You're misconfigured. And you're choosing to be fake as fuck. All right, that's the last time I'm going to hurt your feelings. And today, we don't patch the glitch. We initiate the SIP protocol. And if you're wondering what that is, I got you. Let's get into our concept overview. The protocol is the person, your apex identity. It's not a guess. It's a protocolized memory of who you were built to be. But when you shift behavior to fit the room, when you swap integrity for interface, you break the seal. What we sip, the SIP protocol, restores harmony between the self you are, the spirit that leads, and the roles you've been assigned to carry. Here's what you'll learn. Why soul fragmentation leads to subconscious betrayal. How to create interoperable identity across all life systems. The neuro-emotional load reduction that comes with singular focus. What it means to route spirit, not reinvent self. And why spiritual consistency is the antidote to performance fatigue. On a day like today, you know I love my Sundays. Most of us go practice faith today because somebody told us it was the right day. Here's our visual metaphor. Multiple radios, same signal. Imagine this. Your soul, your mind, and your body all hold walkie-talkies. Some of you don't even know what those are. But they're tuned to different frequencies. Your spirit is saying, stay anchored. Your mind is screaming, survive. Your body's whispering, yo, this room ain't safe. That is what it feels like when you move across roles without remembrance. The SIP protocol retunes the frequency. It doesn't change your message. It makes sure every layer of you speaks it in sync. Same voice, same source, sealed signal. Let's check if the chat is popping before I get into my personal perspective, because this one's a little personal. My personal perspective, I call this the spirit that moved in secret, and I'm going to say it all the way straight. I can be a dark, dark man, and I think all of us have that in us. It's one of my greatest gifts, if you want to call it that. And part of that is I know how to keep a secret. I've built entire personas in rooms I never belonged in and walked out wearing a win like a second skin. I can adapt, perform, dominate, then disappear. And nobody would know the difference, except, of course, for me and God. So now I wasn't confused. I was just committed to the version of me that could move in silence, win in silence, and ultimately sin in silence. And I prided myself on that. There's a certain intoxication, if you would, in winning quietly. When you know you just made a move, no one will ever see. And the aura that follows you isn't proof, it's residue. I carried that mask into every room. I tuned my voice to the space. I changed my posture to the power dynamic. I was driven, calculated, and this is dangerous. Because here's the truth nobody tells you about that kind of shape-shifting, because that's what you're doing. You become seduced by secrecy. Your identity gets dictated by the room, and your soul becomes the slave of your success strategy. And that's when you stop being a man. You become a weapon with no allegiance. And what happens next is spiritual fragmentation. Not all at once. It's not dramatic. Not the obvious movie scene. Just a slow drip of disobedience. Until you're carrying memories no one will ever know, and pain no one can ever prove. Yeah, that's when hell begins. Because the deepest torment isn't when someone finds out. It's when they don't. And you're still the one who has to live with it. And the ones you hurt, because you're hurting a lot more than yourself in this process. They don't know the details, and it's natural for them to imagine worse. So what hurts, it isn't just the act. It's the fracture in your presence they can't explain. That's when you realize there's a cost to secrecy that no success can repay. So I created this protocol, the spiritual interoperability protocol. That's what I talk about when I say SIP. And it's a reminder for me of the man I never want to be again. Because when you're forced to live in rooms and environments and cultures that demand performance, and you no longer know who you were designed to be, you start forgetting who you are. You start begging for the silence you used to weaponize. This protocol is how I killed that old man. The one who wore masks with pride and called it strategy. The one who lied in languages even God wept over. The one who thought he was winning when he was really just avoiding his own reflection. I built this protocol so I could finally stop performing and just be sealed. We're going to get into the system teaching. Let's check the chat. Let me be extra explicit about how I feel about this. It's natural, especially if you are starting from not just zero. I talk a lot of times about being under the basement pavement. Some of us are scratching and clawing out of poverty, not just in financial terms, but in conscious terms, in our identities, how we assign authority to our spirit and our souls. And like any life experience, we get exposure. Some of it is on the grandest scales, some of it, of course, on the micro and most minuscule. Depending on where you're at in the spectrum, a lot of it too is just right there in the middle. Exposure to these rooms, exposure to additional culture, different collective levels of consciousness, as you're, well, I guess we could call it grinding out, it's natural to submit to the room. You're trying to figure out who you are. You're trying to figure out how to be successful with who you are. You might have goals and aspirations and thoughts and ideas, but when you step into a room and you see success, I talked a few episodes ago about the empty suit. It's natural to conform. And there's many sayings, one of the biggest ones that hurt my soul. Conformity or cowardice, conformity is the cowardice of man. It's the ultimate plague of man. I've been talking a lot recently about the plague of consciousness. And conforming, it feels right because the room dictates the pace. The room is dictating the terms. And because we're so far down trying to scratch and claw, crabs in the barrel style, we're just trying to find air to breathe. We look at the room and we say, okay, what is it asking me to do? How is it asking me to behave? What sort of identity do I have to put on in order to stay in this room? And a lot of times, surfacely, there's nothing, quote unquote, wrong with that. I just had a conversation yesterday with somebody I hadn't seen in a while. And we talked about the level of thinking as you get older, as wisdom hits, as life hits. And this gentleman is in his late 50s, about 57, 58. And he was kind of expressing to me how sometimes he just has to hear himself speak out loud because he's concerned about some of what he's thinking, some of what he's behaving, and some of the experiences he's going through in life have a lot to do with what he experienced from early childhood. The environments, what he was exposed to through his parenting, his upbringing, his siblings, the different cultures that he was exposed to, and how it's all sort of starting to really come to the surface later on in life. And he's trying to understand if what I'm thinking is correct. And a lot of what we found sort of a balance on is, well, baseline, how do we determine what is correct? That's difficult. And correct for us, ultimately, as we progress and proceed, and as we strive for success, is going to be our ability to sustain some sort of relationship to success, which is how we perform at work, how we perform in our finances, what we invest in, relative, right? And it's not just like investing in the market. You're investing in your life every day. The relationships you're in are an investment to your well-being, to your identity. It should also your network. What you expose yourself to helps you either stay in the exact room you're at or elevate past rooms. But if you come from a lot of poverty-driven and broke-based consciousness, it's difficult to see past that because we are in constant survival mode. Again, we use these terms here and we try to emphasize the mechanics of consciousness, even down to the brain level, the neurological level, although I'm not any of that as far as my full breadth of knowledge. I just try to do as much research and apply it as much as I can and then share what I'm learning. But the spirit interoperability protocol effectively means, I believe this fundamentally. We all know at some juncture, Carl Jung, right, the Swiss psychologist, I reference him often, he talks about just about everybody goes through a midlife crisis. And the reason is the midlife is where you start to question everything that got you to where you're at, and then what do I do with the last half? And a lot of what got you to that juncture is applicable in many ways because it's applied knowledge and wisdom. But I think one of the things you reflect on is, clearly I got myself there, but I didn't get myself there in the way that I was performing to how I was told things should go. How many of us really question, and when do we question, at what juncture do we question where we're at and how we got there? Which is then, I think, a natural progression towards, all right, if it got me here, do I want to continue it to get me there? But ultimately, I think what aligns with that sort of middle phase, that middle season, is you ask the question of who am I? Who am I really? And socially, we'll start to, I think we're becoming I was listening to two kids the other day, man, they couldn't have been older than their early 20s, talk about dopamine and sort of how they were influenced and what dad didn't do because dad wasn't there. And I think it's becoming culturally very common to understand how a lot of our processes work. But again, it becomes very surface and high level. We don't go into the intimacies. And the intimacies for me, which is why I push as much as I can, returning to root source, who for me is God, is that you're trying to figure out who your spirit was before it got inundated with information that wasn't yours. You get what I'm saying? Just because you are who you are, where you are, sure, you identify with it, and it becomes you in essence because you've experienced it. But you can sort of delete all that and wipe the slate clean, if you but so decide. Now, it's not as simplistic as, hey, just forget everything. You don't want to do that. You don't want to suppress anything either. But there's a realization that what got me here, I was instructed, I was imprinted on, I was shown, and I sort of adapted to it. I conformed to it, mainly because if I didn't, I get kicked out of that room. And imagine that some of us are, we talked about returning to negative stasis, are just sort of keeping ourselves afloat. We know somehow we naturally want more, but we can't figure out how to push past exactly where we're at. And it's because it's likely because we can't think about anything other than where we're at. And our spirit is just assigning ourselves to whatever the room tells us to be, whatever the relationship tells us we should be. And that somehow if we stop performing it, we lose everything. In that way, we think we might get wiped clean and then we lose everything. That's not like, at that point, I asked the question, what define everything? So before we get into the system teaching for how we leverage opt-in, we talked about one priority at a time. Our spirit interoperability protocol, it really is the idea that all rooms have terms and conditions. In all rooms, because they have terms and conditions, it's essentially a binding contract. And once you step in and you sign that contract, your soul is effectively saying, okay, I know we said we would want to do one thing, but now we're adhering to what the room says. So who are we really? Are we really what the room says as far as terms and conditions for our life, or are we creating our own terms and conditions? That's the difference between having autonomy and having full authority, and again, conforming and just continuing to repeat processes that likely weren't ever ours to begin with. All right, our black book, system teaching, SIP protocol. We're gonna talk about the opt-in interoperability layer. So at this point, you might ask yourself, what is SIP? I gotta sneeze. Hold on 1 second. Woo. Excuse me, and sorry about that. So what is SIP? S-I-P. It's really like you sipping something. SIP stands for the Spiritual Interoperability Protocol. It is the alignment layer that allows your soul, your system, and spirit to function as a unified operating system across multiple life roles. Part of what I do in IT is telephony. We call in telephony some of what allows us to communicate a codec. This is like a spiritual telephony codec. It makes you interoperable across fatherhood leadership or motherhood, marriage creation, obedience, warfare, healing, without fragmentation, without emotional translation fatigue, without violating your covenant. What do we talk about on the Do You rules before I get into the telephony parallel? God, faith, honor, loyalty. I bring the same criteria, the same level of virtuousness, the same level of, it's not really skill set. It's my baseline core of what I believe my soul is. So when I use that, all right, cool. I might be behaving as the father. I'm in the room of fatherhood. I'm in the room of business. I'm in the room of marriage. I know who I need to be relative to the role, but how I perform my role is not dictated by the room per se. I bring myself into the room, and the room adapts to me. Otherwise, I don't go in that room. And in that way, I never have to worry about, some of us, I think, I find this very fascinating. We come home after a long day and we need to decompress. Are you decompressing because your job is that hard, or because you had to fake it so hard at your job just to ensure you didn't get fired? right? Think about that. I got to put a big smile on my face. I got to deal with a boss I don't really like. I got to deal with it. I find it, I try very hard to stay off of social media, but I was scrolling LinkedIn the other day, and toxic cultures and toxic water room cooler conversation and the toxicity at work with everybody quiet quitting. So you subject yourself to that every single day. And you come home feeling less spirited. Why do you think? Because you compromise your spirit the entirety of your day. And if you do that over the course of a week, you're at least putting 40 hours in of sacrificing your spirit. And I know, Jeff, what do I do? I need my job. I know you do. But do you need that job that you're at right now? Do you need that environment, that culture? I also beg the question, how are you contributing? If you sit at the water cooler, stand at the water cooler, at the copy machine. I know it's a little bit old school and legacy. If you go into the conference rooms and you find that you don't necessarily want to align with this, but hey, I got to do it because I got to stay in this room, well, then you're sacrificing your spirit. And the more you sacrifice your spirit, and you're doing this subconsciously, you're not, I can't fathom that we're doing this all the way conscious, because left to analyze, how would you want to behave? You would give me 1,000 different ways of how you would want it to be different. So you can say whatever you want, but when you act, that's why we talk about the acting, behaving, performing in that way. The more you repeat these patterns, the more your subconscious is like, I don't care what you think. I don't even care what you think your spirit is. You keep behaving as this. That's your true spirit. That overrides what you actually think. And of course, it's complex. If for no other reason that most of us are in these rooms maintaining the environment, maintaining the culture. How do cultures scale? How does toxicity scale? Because we all subscribe to it. Of course, it's not you. It's the other people. But you're still sitting there absorbing it. What I talked about in my personal perspective, I could always identify this. And ironically, I always knew what it took. I just figured to identify, all right, I know how the room flows. I could do this. I'm just going to do it at the highest level. What's more egregious? To just sit there and do it and accept it and just fit in, or not just fit in, but lead it. I took over toxic cultures and became the leader of the toxic culture, which means what? At a spirit level, I'm maintaining that and scaling it, because that's ultimately the how you also profit the most off of your life. If you just impact you, the universe repays you even down to a 9-to-5 level. At that level, you only just impacted one person. You put yourself in a leadership role. You have a team of 10, 20. I've had teams of hundreds. Now you're the root of that. So how do you think your spirit feels? I go into the office. I got to think about, who do I need to be in this room? We go out after work and have some drinks. Who am I in this room? I come home. Who am I in this room? When all of them are different, your spirit is massively conflicted. I'm not suggesting the way I reference, I can be very dark. We all can be very dark. The gentleman I was speaking to yesterday, what we talked about is, how dark are your thoughts? Dark. We all experience darkness. The difference with SIP and how we're going to talk about it as we continue to scale this conversation out is I don't have to subject myself to compromising my spirit. And if required, I got to leave that room. I got to leave that relationship. I got to figure it out a different way. So now, specific to my business, a little geeky, but again, I'm in the telephony space for IT. In network systems, SIP stands for Session Initiation Protocol. It allows devices on different brands, on different carriers, to speak to each other. I can simply say it as, you could be on Verizon, I could be on AT&T. Somebody could be on T-Mobile, somebody could be on Boost, somebody could have the Obama phone or whatever it is. There's a language that has to be spoken between the systems to allow it to talk to each other. So that when you say hello and the other person says hello, assuming you're not texting, that you can hear each other. That's what it does in technology. So essentially, it is what allows any phone system to talk to another phone system or like system. Here's what this protocol unlocks exactly from a spirit level. God is like what I refer to as the codec. God is the source. You are the SIP-enabled device. So you could think of yourself like the phone. The phone has massive potential to be able to communicate. Life is the multi-platform ecosystem. So we're all a SIP device. We're all a spiritually interoperable device. We all have spirit, but we all have different spirits because we all have different cultures. We all have even different languages, right? But we can still communicate. You can communicate this with somebody who can't speak a word of English, presuming you speak English. You smile, they smile. That's radiation, right? That's spirit. And life is just, it has so many different spirits. The ecosystem is very broad. Here's what happens when SIP is sealed. You don't guess who to be in the room. You just transmit the same spirit tailored by environment. You honor your values while flexing your execution. You still got to execute. But I bring the same spirit with me. I don't have to worry about who I need to be relative to what my spirit says. And it's powerful because then I never have to worry about who I'm actually being, which means I never have to worry about who I'm becoming. Interoperable does not equal interchangeable. You don't need to switch selves. Yo, it's worth repeating. You don't need to walk in a room and think about who do I need to switch to right now. No. You just need to understand what the room is. You need to route your sealed self through different missions. When your identity is protocolized, I hate how I sound when I say that word. You no longer dilute to fit, you deploy to build. And when it doesn't fit, you opt out. Because sealed souls don't negotiate with misalignment. We're going to get into some of the system benefits in a second. I can't stress to you enough. When you compromise your spirit, you're diluting yourself. It's also negative stasis. Square pegs, round holes. That's how you get bunions on your feet, right? You're stuffing your shoe and you're stuffing your foot into something that doesn't fit you. Your soul is breaking. You got bunion soul. Word up. Think about it. Life is like that. Here's a system benefit. We talked about, I told you what you will learn, the cognitive load reduction. Unsealed souls waste energy calculating who to be. Not only that, you forget who you are. And then who you become more often might come out at the wrong time and ruin the wrong relationship. And you don't realize that as you move room to room, relationship to relationship, you're worried about, well, what do I need to do to accommodate this person? What do I need to do to accommodate that person? No, I'm just me. If I have to calculate myself, that relationship is gone. And while you're doing that, you're wasting massive energy. And you may not be conscious of it, but subconsciously, you're constantly trying to remember code. Wait, who am I when I walk here? Who am I when I walk there? You're fake AF, right? SIP-enabled souls use energy to apply who they already are. I don't got to think about it. That's why you feel tired. That's why your nervous system is fried. Because you're switching when you were designed to route. Yo, we're going to get into consequences in a second. Where the chat at? You were designed to have control, autonomy, and to dictate the terms and conditions of your life, inclusive of accepting the terms and conditions of other relationships and the ecosystem available to you in life. But when you submit all that and you release it, you dilute your soul, man. Here's consequences of inaction. Emotional memory leak from roll to roll. You'll experience burnout masked as adaptability. You'll have unclear leadership presence, identity fatigue, and spiritual numbness. Silent resentment in places where you were supposed to stand tall. And here's the worst of all. You'll become fluent in identity translation, but forget how to speak your own soul language. Oof. Because if your system keeps changing voices, you'll stop recognizing God's. When you speak at your soul level, that's why I don't care what you call it, and you return the root, that is the creator. That is the full essence of you. Here's how to lock daily remembrance. The SIP initiation. You want to anchor your apex daily. We talk about what my core values are. That's a lot of it, right? Yes, I do the entrepreneurial thing. I get on the mic and I try to, I am an influencer. I am a father. I am a husband. I am a 9-to-5er. I am someone who makes money. I am someone who creates environment, etc. and on and on. But the outcome of the roles also is not relevant, specific to my spirit. My apex, God, faith, honor, loyalty, one identity, one signal, no negotiation. That's how to lock your apex daily. It's not about who you are being, it's what you're becoming. We talked about it a few days ago. I want to be the kind of man that, I want to be the kind of woman that. All the prizes and trophies that we assign to success relative to our impact in a role is relevant. Yes, sure. But the only way you seal it and scale it and you get maximum value is with who you are in the role. It's not the role. The role is a symbol. It's relevant in that way, sure, but it doesn't define you. It shouldn't define you. I am already defined before I step into it. And yes, it requires a mask. And yes, you got to switch the mask. But my apex is locked. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference between who I am at work, who I am at home, who I am in private. Big. I'm upset with myself. I didn't emphasize that enough until this point. Who you are in private, left to sit with that, can be massively blissful or excruciatingly painful, heaven and hell. And who you are, we talked about the dark thoughts in the conversation I had just yesterday. The dark thoughts don't go away. It's not that they perpetuate, but they intensify, because you have to understand, I could be that if I chose to. I am choosing not to. So anchor your apex. Anchor, big word, right? Anchor. If you're a big ship, you don't want to be the Titanic. You don't want to crash. You drop the anchor. It's what holds you down. God, faith, honor, loyalty. Then you want to define the room. Then you want to define the room, then deploy the protocol. Don't ask who you need to be. Ask, what role am I routing my sealed self through? Important distinction. I am a nurturer in all of my roles. I have a team of people I work with that rely on me. I'm the overarching department head leader. That's a significant thing. I don't identify as the title. In fact, I told you about this. One of the things I got that I wasn't able to process from one of my mentors way back when. When I'm introducing myself, I don't speak my title. I say I'm part of this team. I am privileged to represent this team as the overarching leader and representative. We try to work to be very transparent. We're a service-driven mindset group. We care deeply about satisfying the business in all facets. And then, of course, we provide a service. But the service we provide is everything I talk about of how we are sealed. And then I'm the same way when I'm at home. I'm the same way in front of my wife. I didn't used to be this way, is my point. Depending on who was calling me, I wouldn't keep the phone on speaker. I didn't keep my phone right now. I can walk around the house. I don't care who's calling me. It's on speaker. I don't care who hears the conversation. My phone is not, I think it does have a lock. It doesn't have a timeout lock. When I open my phone, I put it down. It doesn't, after 2 minutes, lock. It's open. I don't care who grabs it. I don't care who looks through it. That sounds cheesy. I know it doesn't sell t-shirts. I wasn't like that for a long time. Why? I was being different people in different roles. I didn't need you seeing what was in my phone. I had to walk outside and have my conversations. And that gives you massive stress and pressure. And if nothing else, when you left to really sit with that, man, it hurts. My point, back to being a nurturer, back to understanding my values. I represent the team I work for, 9 to 5, the same way I represent my family, the same way I represent myself, the same way I represent God, the same way I represent myself in private and in silence. So I just bring that person everywhere I go. I don't have to worry about it. You want to recognize the disconnect as a signal loss. If you feel drained, and it's not because you've been going through your metabolic conditioning and your high intensity cardio, your heavy lifting, going through PRs. If you're just switching up your roles because you're not really locked in, you got to re-sip. If you feel fragmented, realign apex. If you feel confused, go silent until you remember the signal. If it wasn't already obvious, adopting this protocol is beautiful, it's brilliant, it'll help you. But there's a transition, like with anything else, a transition that must occur where you're stripping yourself of your previous identity, and it feels like your fingernails are being pulled off your hands and your feet, man. That's how stressful it is. Like you're pulling away your physical body from your soul to reattach new skin. And so you're gonna have some moments that are dark and you question. That's part of what we talked about yesterday. Growth, unpredictable. You can't really script it, right? You just walk the path. You just walk the path. You just walk the path. Forward, not backward. You don't stand still. You don't take a break. And now when you're walking the path, you think you just because you're going on the path you need to go that all the other paths aren't available. No. They're not just available, they're calling you. Yo, Jeff, come back this way. Yo, Jeff, come back this way. And before you cut everybody off, which is very popular, they're gonna be texting you and calling you. And then randomly you're gonna bump into somebody. Oh, and they're gonna remind you of who they think you are. You're gonna have a failure moment that reminds you of who you think you are. Something's gonna hit you that makes you want to fall back into who you think you are. All because you're trying to remember who you really are. Sounds like wordplay. I know. Try it. Here's our creation covenant loop. ARR, audit, remix, re-record, re-record. You got the call. Now move like it's recorded. We start with an audit. Here's our emotional memory recall identity. Ask yourself, which version of me walked into this room? Is this identity opted in through God, faith, root, source, the infinite, love, or outsourced through fear? Am I spiritually connected or performing old code in new rooms? Ask yourself that. Have you even asked yourself who you need to be before you walk into a room or you just perform? Is that locked into you? Have you forgotten who you're behaving as in these rooms? And then you wonder why you're conflicted. Then you want to hit it with the remix. Here's our thought identities. Old thought. I have to adapt to be effective. I've always done things this way. I can't lose what I got. Here's a new thought. Interoperability isn't compromise. It's covenant deployment. Every room meets the same me, coded for context, not diluted by it. It's also okay to take control of the room you're in, but contextually remain the same. Don't be diluted by what the culture and the environment is telling you should be. You don't have to accept those terms and conditions. Broke-based mindset. It's at scale. You don't have to accept it. If you do, you're just choosing to fit in, right? You can choose to fit in. That's what this is all about. Are you choosing to fit in? Are you choosing to stand out? I don't sell t-shirts either, right? Then you want to re-record. Our action identity. Refuse to perform. Stop being a puppet. Choose to transmit. Reroute your highest self through the next environment you enter. Anchor your body, your tone, your decisions, and your behavior in the one sealed apex: God, faith, honor, loyalty. Pick yours. Start the day with the sip ritual. One apex, one ask, one priority. Say less, transmit more. This is something that eluded me that I want to drive really quickly as far as how SIP is able to also elevate your life experience. Your spirit is interoperable, meaning it can perform in any room. It can live anywhere on your terms. One priority at a time. We talked about it before. Opt in. When you lock in on the priority for where I'm at right now in my spirit is X, you don't have to worry about what other rooms, what other relationships, what other experience. Wait, this is my priority right now. I don't have to floss. I don't have to front. I don't have to flex. I just have to be who I said I was going to be, because right now this is all I can do. Presence. We talk about presence. The significance of presence is not just, kumbaya, let's meditate and let's, feel good about namaste and all that. No disrespect. It's just, I'm here now. I can't be anywhere else. If I'm working out, I'm working out. If I'm recording, I'm recording. If I'm praying, I'm praying. If I'm being a father, etc. Nothing else matters. That is my priority, and I can only take it one priority at a time. But I don't have to fret. I don't have to worry. I don't have to concern myself with deviating, because I am SIP enabled. I lock in on my apex. I lock in on my priority. I bring my same spirit with me everywhere I go, right? Say less, transmit more. It's your energy, your vibe, your frequency, your spirit. You don't need another version of you. You need a sealed transmission of the version God already stamped. Every time you switch for the room, you lose a little signal. Every time you adapt without remembrance, you break covenant with the one voice that matters. Seal the protocol. Anchor the soul. Transcend the room. Because when you are spiritually interoperable, you don't have to fight to be understood. You just move like a man or a woman or a human who doesn't need translation. Own it or be owned by it. You either run the system or the system runs you. Change your mind, change your life. I am who I say I am. Do you and stay rich.